It's our last broadcast before Halloween, but a clear start to the weekend. Let's take a look at the surface map. Things have definitely settled down across the country. We have an outgoing weather system on the East Coast, but still some residual rain and snow showers across much of that area. Across the central U.S., we've got high pressure extending from Wisconsin down to Texas. And the next big weather change is up there in the Pacific Northwest. You can see a new cold front coming in through Idaho and Oregon. And that's going to move rapidly across the northern tier states. And why don't we just check the GFS and see how it's all going to unfold. We can see that the low this evening is going to be up in Saskatchewan, and by that time the cold front should be coming through much of Montana, down into the high deserts of Oregon. And the warm front, well, I see two possible lobes, one right there and maybe another further south. But that puts this whole area around Minnesota, Iowa, and North Dakota into an area of warm advection. So we're going to start seeing an upward lift there and the formation of clouds as that system approaches from the west. By Saturday evening, the weather system will be remaining up in Canada, but the cold front will be smashing southeastward through the northern plains. There it is on Saturday evening, and then by Sunday evening, you can see how quickly that moves all the way to the east coast. And some massive cold air advection, especially in Virginia, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania. So it's going to be kind of gusty there behind the front, and in the wake of that, looks like an upper level low over southern Ontario. Now you can see that there's not a whole lot of push of Arctic air. We don't see a huge high coming in behind this system. This indicates that the origin of this air mass is mostly Pacific, British Columbia, kind of took a track like that right there. So it's not going to be particularly cold in the southern part of the country. Should be a rapid recovery to that, and you can see already by Tuesday, warm air advection setting up across the plains. And we'll just look ahead to the next big weather change. Looks like it's going to be quiet until Friday next week. There comes the next system, and looks like falling pressures down there in the Gulf. Maybe a new tropical storm down there. And we're going to be right in between. This one looks a little bit more southerly, coming in next weekend through the western U.S. And one wave moves up into Canada, but looks like more pressure falls out to the west. So it looks kind of stormy going into the following week. Anyway, some of you may be wondering about Election Day. Yeah, that's going to be kind of a historic day there. That's a snapshot of what things are going to look like midday. Looks really nice across much of the country. I don't see any weather really anywhere except in the Seattle area. And looks kind of cold in the northeast. Otherwise, it's going to be picture perfect. Here's our 250 millibar analysis up near the top of the troposphere. Mostly zonal. There's the location of the polar front jet kind of waving eastward from the northern Pacific all the way out towards the Maritimes. I would say that's a typical position for this time of year. A couple of large waves embedded in that. This is associated this wave in the Great Lakes associated with the outgoing polar air mass. Here's the next weather maker across British Columbia. That's supporting that low that we saw on the surface analysis up in the Pacific Northwest. And then another wave that's going to come into the picture in a few days. That's out over the Aleutians. And then we also have this unsettled area of low pressure off the California coast. Let's see if there's any changes when that's expected to pull out. Oh, also, yeah, the subtropical jet making an appearance here. There it is across Texas. And there's a forecast sounding for DFW. This captures the subtropical jet. We can see the core is pretty high, way up there at about 200 millibars That's up near 39 to 40,000 feet. And you can see down lower at 300 millibars, down around 30,000 feet, it's relatively weak, about 35 knots, and weaker below that. That's a clear signal that that's a subtropical jet, the very high altitude. So this is going to be tied to thermal gradients in the mid and upper troposphere. And here's a look at a cross-section from northwest Canada all the way down towards the western Gulf. That goes across Montana all the way down towards Texas. And this shows the subtropical jet way up there. And you can see the potential temperature fields are bent. These are kind of like, you can think of them as isotherms. And when they're bent, that tells you that there's a gradient. And what I mean is bent in the vertical. So yeah, not much of a gradient down here, but certainly aloft. That's helping to support that subtropical jet. The polar front jet up to the north, quite a bit deeper. And you can see the bending of the isotropes occurring through a much deeper layer. So the front, yeah, that's going to be roughly right in there. That's the cold air mass. It looks like it's picking up another cold front, maybe a little further north, supporting this other jet in northern Canada. In the southwestern U.S., it is mild. The air mass is in a state of recovery, and we're seeing temperatures coming up in the southwest deserts. And in Texas, kind of a similar situation there. They're recovering also. High pressure kind of moving out, and we're starting to see the establishment of a lee side trough as the flow starts picking up in advance of the next system up to the northwest. Let's take a look at a couple of soundings. Even when the weather is fair, I think it's still really valuable to take a look and kind of get a baseline on what we should be seeing. Let's take a look in the middle of this high around Grand Junction, Colorado. What we see is this morning there was a very strong radiational inversion. That strong cooling over the high terrain tends to support those plateau highs, and that's kind of what that polar air mass has evolved into in the Central Rockies. So the column is a little bit on the cool side here, and that supports higher pressures near the surface. Let's check out near Phoenix, where it is warming up. And there we see a radiational inversion, not quite as strong. And then by later in the day, the sounding around Phoenix looks like this. Very, very strong heating. Those temperatures coming up to the 80s and a very steep lapse rate. But it does look like there's a little bit of cirrus, probably associated with that subtropical jet, which is centered up at 200 millibars. A few patches of snow still hanging on in the Texas Panhandle. Looks like from about, looks like the heavier stuff is near Pampa, back towards Vega, and this other patch northwest of Tucumcari. So I guess they had some pretty good depths in that area. Some clouds associated with the subtropical jet. There it is right there. Otherwise, looks pretty nice in that region. In the southeast, at the very beginning of the loop, you can see some fog trapped in the valleys of the Ozarks. Well, that quickly burns off. And elsewhere, what we have is classic cold air advection working down through the Appalachians into Tennessee, Alabama, and into the Gulf Coast. That cold air advection stratocumulus especially prominent along the Gulf Coast, and this is kind of a lake effect type scenario, similar to what we see in the Great Lakes this time of year. You get a very cold air mass moving out over the warmer waters, picking up moisture, destabilizing, getting warmed from below. You get a very strong cold over warm scenario. And that means increased instability, and there's plenty of moisture down there, so you're going to get clouds very quickly. And out to the east, we see the frontal boundary coming into the Miami area, passing Fort Lauderdale, and looks like a secondary boundary just south of the North Carolina coast. And there it is, the surface analysis for the southeastern U.S. It's on the cool side, but not particularly cold. In the northeastern U.S., we have the outgoing baroclinic system, some snow showers out in Massachusetts and Connecticut. That's all tapering off slowly. A few showers also in northwest Pennsylvania, some of that coming down as snow. We still have a data loss up in Canada, and I need to start looking into that. Aviation Weather Center is starting to pick up some data up there, but earlier, an hour ago, there was nothing, so I'm not really sure what's going on. The satellite loop showing that outgoing surface system somewhere out there off the coast of Cape Cod. And there's the wraparound comet cloud, and behind it some very potent cold advection, especially out over the Great Lakes. And there's our next system coming out of the Pacific Northwest. You can see the unstable conditions off the Washington coast, that vertical development on that cumulus field right there. And the front itself, I decided to try to grab some more surface data, and yeah, we're getting the Canadian data. And there it is, big old low there near Calgary. And you can see the very strong temperature difference across that warm front, especially in South Dakota. You go from 33 there at Pierre up to 60 at Rapid City. That's quite a change. Strong downslope in Montana and Wyoming, so very gusty conditions there. Winds up to 35 knots at Casper. That's about 40 miles an hour. And even stronger around Billings and Butte. I guess, yeah, it's probably Butte, Livingston, somewhere in there. And there's the front. I've kind of analyzed it right there, maybe a little closer to that cloud field. Let's try taking a look at a cross-section from, say, around Vancouver, maybe north of there, down into the Snake River Valley and towards Salt Lake City. We should clip that front right in the middle. So we're going to do this on the 18Z data. And thanks to Tropical Tidbits for that pretty neat map system they have. We'll draw at that front. There it is. So we should hit that front. And before I let go, yeah, you can see the thickness gradient right there. Well, this is the southern edge of that thickness gradient. Let's check it out. So we're looking at the wind field strictly parallel to the page there. So here the winds are mostly blowing northwest to southeast. So yeah, we do see the frontal gradient. Certainly in there. Right in there. Yeah, this is all... That looks like the front, and it looks like it kind of arcs back up like that over British Columbia. And above that, we do have the support for the jet stream. Strong 50, 60, 70 knot winds up there at 300 to 200 millibars. And there's a look at the humidity and vertical motion concentrated right along that front. Now the isotopes are a little bit different. We're looking at theta E. That's not really good for diagnosing the front, but it does kind of follow a similar structure right there. And I appreciate all the comments on the videos. Christopher Kane talking about the Canadian data there. Fun with Tech says, thanks Tim, enjoyed the overview. Yeah, sometimes I use these shortcut buttons, but the sentiment is still appreciated. Sometimes I'll fix it up. Yeah, Sean Floyd, great as always, appreciate that. Ron Chalfant asking about La Nina. Yeah, according to this table from the Climate Prediction Center, looks like we're heading into a La Nina. The outlooks definitely reflect that. In a El Nino pattern, we would expect it to be kind of rainy here on the Gulf Coast. We've got the opposite in the forecast. Also, not very much precip on the West Coast showing up for this season. And conditions colder than normal expected in the northern U.S., and that tends to be common during a La Nina year or so. There you go. Ron Chalfant there also sending thanks. Calvin Luo asking about diagnosis based on Omega equations. Wizzle writes, awesome. Florida Herper says you deserve a lot more views and subscribers. Helen Salino says good job as usual. Wizzle has a cat on him as he watches this. And RF commenting on my Skew-t Air Force Base videos. And there's some older stuff from a week ago, but I appreciate all the comments. And thanks to our supporters like Christopher Kane, Timothy Lofton, Brian Lowe, Brian Nelson, Bill Peterson. Your support does mean quite a bit. And that'll do it for this edition of Forecast Lab. Thank you for joining, and I hope you have a great Halloween and a great weekend. We'll see you on Monday for the supporters and Tuesday for everybody else. Take care. Bye-bye.